Good evening, and welcome to our midweek meditation. This coming Sunday, we will be celebrating together the Feast of the Transfiguration. I'd like to read for you the first couple of verses from our Gospel for this Sunday, found in Mark chapter 9. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely white, as no one on earth could bleach them. I'd like to share with you some words about the Transfiguration, words that I have shared before from the Bishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa, from his book, God Has a Dream, a vision of hope for our time. I'd also like to share 3 songs with you, songs by Ken Miedema. The first and the last of those songs I'll sing to you myself. The middle song about Moses, I will play a recording of Ken Miedema singing that song himself. We go together on a journey of transfiguration, a journey of seeing God's transfigured world, a journey of partnership with God. God believes in us. Dear child of God, it is often difficult for us to recognize the presence of God in our lives and in our world. In the clamor of the tragedy that fills the headlines, we forget about the majesty that is present all around us. We feel vulnerable and often helpless. It is true that all of us are vulnerable, for vulnerability is the essence of creaturehood. But we are not helpless, and with God's love, we are ultimately invincible. Our God does not forget those who are suffering and oppressed. During the darkest days of apartheid, I used to say to P.W. Botha, the president of South Africa, that we had already won, and I invited him and the other white South Africans to join the winning side. All the objective facts were against us. The pass laws, the imprisonments, the tear gassing, the massacres, the murder of political activists. But my confidence was not in the present circumstances, but in the laws of God's universe. This is a moral universe, which means that despite all the evidence that seems to be to the contrary, there is no way that evil and injustice and oppression and lies can have the last word. God is a God who cares about right and wrong. God cares about justice and injustice. God is in charge. That is what had upheld the morale of our people, to know that in the end, good will prevail. It was these higher laws that convinced me that our peaceful struggle would topple the immoral laws of apartheid. Of course, there were times when you had to whistle in the dark to keep your morale up, and you wanted to whisper in God's ear, God, we know you are in charge, but can't you make it a little more obvious? God did make it more obvious to me once, during what we call the Feast of the Transfiguration. Apartheid was in full swing as I and other church leaders were preparing for a meeting with the Prime Minister to discuss one of the many controversies that erupted in those days. We met at a theological college that had closed down because of the government's racist policies. During our discussions, I went into the Priory Garden for some quiet. There was a huge Calvary, a large wooden cross without corpus, but with protruding nails and a crown of thorns. It was a stark symbol of the Christian faith. It was winter. The grass was pale and dry, and nobody would have believed that in a few weeks' time it would be lush and green and beautiful again. It would be transfigured. As I sat quietly in the garden, I realized the power of transfiguration, of God's transformation of our world. The principle of transfiguration is at work when something so unlikely as the brown grass that covers our veld in winter becomes bright green again. Or when the tree with gnarled leafless branches bursts forth with the sap flowing so that the birds sit chirping in the leafy branches. Or when the once dry streams gurgle with swift flowing water, when winter gives way to spring and nature seems to experience its own resurrection. The principle of transfiguration says nothing, no one, and no situation is untransfigurable. That the whole of creation, nature, waits expectantly for its transfiguration, when it will be released from its bondage and share in the glorious liberty of the children of God, when it will not be just dry, inert matter, but will be translucent with divine glory. Christian history is filled with examples of transfiguration. An erstwhile persecutor, like St. Paul, could become the greatest missionary of the church he once persecuted. One who denied his master not once but 3 times, like St. Peter, could become the Prince of Apostles, proclaiming boldly faith in Jesus Christ, when only a short while before he was cowering in abject fear behind locked doors. I doubt, however, that we could produce a more spectacular example of this principle of transfiguration than the cross itself. Most people would have been filled with revulsion had someone gone and set up an electric chair or a gallows or the guillotine as an object of reverence. Well, look at the cross. It was a ghastly instrument of death, of an excruciatingly awful death reserved for the most notorious malefactors. It was an object of dread and shame. And yet what a turnaround has happened. This instrument of a horrendous death has been spectacularly transfigured. Once a means of death, it is now perceived by Christians to be a source of life eternal. Far from being an object of vilification and shame, it is an object of veneration. As I sat in the Priory garden, I thought of our desperate political situation in the light of this principle of transfiguration. And from that moment on, it has helped me to see with new eyes. Did you ever feel the sun rise? Hear the coming of the dawn? Did you ever kneel on spring grass when the winter snows are gone? Did you ever feel a friend smile? Put your arms around a tree. Did you ever touch a newborn baby? Isn't that a lovely way to see? From that moment on, it has helped me to see with new eyes. If God is transfiguring the world, you may ask, why does God need our help? The answer is quite simple. We are the agents of transformation that God uses to transfigure the world. In the Bible, when God wanted the children of Israel to be freed from bondage in Egypt, he could have done it on his own, but he wanted a human partner. We often forget that the patriarchs and matriarchs were flesh and blood humans, but the Bible reminds us of this repeatedly. These people, with all their flaws, were able to be God's heroic partners. So God went to Moses and he said something along these lines. Hi, Moses. Hi, God. Moses, I want you to go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go. Moses was thoroughly flabbergasted. What? Me? What have I done now? Go to Pharaoh? Please, God, no. You can't be serious. Forgetting that God knew everything, Moses pleaded, God, you know I stammer. How can I address Pharaoh? Mercifully, God did not accept Moses' first negative reactions. If he had, the children of Israel would still be in Egypt in bondage. The God we worship is the Exodus God, the great liberator God, who leads us out of all kinds of bondage.
Oh, Moses, way back there in the wilderness, came to the bush, saw some smoke, and the bush was burning. God said, take off your shoes, Moses. You're on holy ground. Moses, I've chosen you to be my man. Moses, over there in Egypt's land. Moses, I've chosen you to work for me. Yeah, Moses, you're gonna set my people free. Not me, Lord. Don't you know I can't talk so good? I stutter all the time. Do you know my brother Aaron? He can sing like an angel, talk like a preacher. Not me, Lord. Can't talk so good. Good. And another thing, how will they know that I've been here with you? How will they know what you've sent me to do? But you know in Egypt, Lord, they want little Moses head. But you know in Egypt, Lord, they want little Moses dead. But you know they'll never hear a single word I say. And you better get your dirty work done another way. Not me, Lord. What's that in your hand, Moses? Just a rod. Throw it down, Moses. Do you mean like on the ground? Yep. Lord, don't take this rod away from me. Don't you know it's my only security? Don't you know when you live here all alone? Well, our man's gotta have something he can call his own. Oh, please, Lord. Throw it down, Moses. But Lord, throw it down, Moses. Throw it down, Moses. Moses threw the rod on the ground, and the rod became my hissing snake. Moses started running. I bet you'd run. I know that I'd run too. He wasn't running from a hot rod, running from a hissing snake, running scared of what God's gonna do, running scared till get a hold of you. And the Lord said, stop. Pick it up, Moses, by the tail. Lord, you have not lived here very long. Lord, I believe you got the whole thing wrong. You see, don't you know that you never pick up, like a hissing snake by his, pick it up, Moses. God? It's a rod again? Smoke and bushes! It's a rod again! Do you know what it means, Moses? Do you know what I'm trying to say, Moses? The rod of Moses became the rod of God, the rod of God. With the rod of God, strike the rocks and the waters will come. With the rod of God, you part those waters of the sea. And with the rod of God, you will strike old Pharaoh dead. With the rod of God, you'll set my people free. So what do you hold in your hands today? To what or to whom are you bound? Are you willing to give it to God right now? Give it up. Let it go. Throw it down.
Do you remember what God told Moses? He said, I have seen the suffering of my people. I have heard their cry. I know their suffering, and am come down to deliver them. Our God is a God who knows. Our God is a God who sees. Our God is a God who hears. Our God is a God who comes down to deliver. But the way that God delivers us is by using us as his partners, by calling on Moses and on you and me. But we are not alone. God does not abandon us in our moments of need. Do you remember the wonderful story in the book of Daniel about the time God's people were being persecuted by the king who expected them to bow down before a graven image? The king set up a golden statue and said that anyone who refused to worship it was going to become a Kentucky Fried Chicken because he was going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. Now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to obey the royal decree. The king called the three and tried to be nice to them. I know there are people who misled you. You will worship the image. They said, "What? No, man." So the king said, "Do you know who I am? I am the king here. I am in charge. We are going to stoke up the fire 7 times hotter than it ever was because you don't listen to me." The story says the fire was so hot it burned to death the soldiers who carried the three to the furnace. But as the king looked into the fire, thinking they would be burnt to a crisp, he could not believe his eyes, for they were walking in the fire. No, there were not 3. There was a 4th with them. And the king looked and said, "There is a 4th who looks like a god." The God we worship doesn't tell his people to wear fireproof suits before going into the furnace. He goes right in there with them. A story from the Holocaust makes a similar point. A Nazi guard was taunting his Jewish prisoner who had been given the filthiest job cleaning the toilets. The guard was standing above him, looking down at him, and said, "Where is your God now?" The prisoner replied, "Right here with me in the muck." And the tremendous thing that has come to me more and more is this recognition of God as Emmanuel, God with us, who does not give good advice from the sidelines. The God who is there with us in the muck. God does not take our suffering away, but he bears it with us and strengthens us to bear it. At times of despair, we must learn to see with new eyes, like the prophet Elisha. The Bible tells us that Elisha and his servants were surrounded by a host of enemies. But the prophet remained strangely calm and somewhat unconcerned, while his servant grew ever more agitated. The prophet asked God to open the servant's eyes, and the servant then saw that those who were on their side were many times more than those against them. This is not just an old story. This is a way to see that you are not alone in your struggle for justice. There are many of you who are working to feed the orphan and the widow. There are many who are working to beat swords into plowshares. There is hope that nightmares will end, hope that seemingly intractable problems will find solutions. God has some tremendous fellow workers, some outstanding partners. Each of us has a capacity for great evil, but also for great good. And that is what convinces God that it was worth the risk of creating us. It is awesome that God, the omnipotent one, depends on us fragile and vulnerable creatures to accomplish God's will and to bring justice and healing and wholeness. God has no one but us. As the great African Saint Augustine of Hippo put it, God without us will not, as we without God cannot. I have often told the story of the rustic priest in Russia who was accosted by a brash young physicist who had rehearsed all the reasons for atheism and arrogantly concluded, "Therefore, I do not believe in God." The little priest, not put off at all, replied quietly, "Oh, it doesn't matter. God believes in you." God does believe in us. God relies on us to help make this world all that God has dreamed of it being. I was lost, God, in the darkness. I was lost, God, but you were looking for me. When you turned the light on, my poor blind eyes began to see. I was lost, God, in the silence. I was lost, God, and you were singing a song. When I heard the music, I just had to try to sing along. Oh, so many times I've seen you before. So many times I've heard your voice. Still it seems like this time there was something much more. This was the time I heard your voice and followed you. I know you in the light now. I know you, and I'm beginning to see. You're opening my eyes, and you are making a song out of me. You're making a song out of me. God is singing a song. God asks us to sing along. Maybe you don't feel like such a great singer, but we have a God who says, don't worry, I will be singing with you. And together, we will transform, transfigure this world. Thanks be to God. Amen.